I call to order this meeting of the Board of Directors of City of Siloam Springs, Arkansas. Roll call.
Blair.
Here.
Carroll.
Here.
Wiles.
Here.
Hunt.
Here.
Rissler.
Here.
Allen.
Here.
Smiley.
This time, would you please stand with me as we have the prayer, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Our dear Heavenly Father, we give thanks to you for all that you provide to us and for protecting us and our families daily. We ask you to help us to make wise decisions to benefit all the citizens of our community and to help lead us into a positive future. We ask that you look after our military and the veterans and all their families, not just here in America, but overseas as well. We ask you to look after our local fire department and police department and in fact, all safety and law enforcement worldwide as they put their lives on the line for the safety and security of us all. We pray for your wisdom and safety for our Governor Sanders and all state officials. And we pray for the safe protection looking after our Mayor Judy Nation and her family as she spends her vacation traveling. We ask these things in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
This time I'd like to ask anyone with a cell phone or electronic device to please turn it to silent so that we don't interrupt anyone speaking. Next is our public input time, and if there's anyone who wishes to speak to the board about any item that is not on tonight's agenda, please come to the podium, give your name and home address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Rebecca Wyatt, 1109 East Jewel Street. For the last couple of months, these meetings have been dominated by a few voices representing a group called Unite Siloam. Meeting after meeting, we have listened to how disturbed they are about the firing of former city administrator Philip Patterson, but I believe they have distorted this issue. When Mr. Allen made his motion to terminate Patterson's contract, he stipulated that Mr. Patterson get all the benefits promised to him. Listening to Mr. Allen's tone led me to believe he wanted to send Mr. Patterson away in good standing, even though the conservative members no longer felt he was the right fit for Siloam Springs. Mr. Patterson tried to end it the same way when he told the news, and I quote, "It is clear that the city board wanted to go a different direction. Mr. Patterson understood that the city administrator position always held the possibility for this to happen. That was apparent by the generous severance package he accepted for himself. In voting to terminate Mr. Patterson's contract, the conservative members of this board were not only within their rights, I feel they were fulfilling their responsibility to the conservative majority who elected them. To portray this as some type of injustice or overstep committed by these members is a ridiculous misrepresentation, in my opinion. The individuals behind Unite Siloam present themselves as the fan club Mr. Patterson may have never wanted. In portraying this as some dark and nefarious affair, they put those board members in the position of trying to defend themselves without speaking ill of Mr. Patterson, and Mr. Patterson in the position of having to write a letter defending his character. My husband has been involved in 6 different city governments in 4 different states. It was always a policy not to publicly discuss personnel matters. I know that is the norm in other places as well. Trying to make this board's unwillingness to speak about Mr. Patterson after he's gone as some type of cover-up is equally absurd. Those spearheading Unite Siloam may disagree politically with what's being done or what has been done, but no wrong has been committed in any of these matters, in my opinion. Political marketing is really what this is all about, I believe. Unite Siloam may claim they are uniting beyond political affiliation or personal beliefs, but I believe what is really going on is they are trying to draw in people who would normally be conservative to help them break up the conservative majority that has dealt a significant blow to their plans of making Siloam Springs less and less Christian conservative. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Kent Wyatt, 1109 East Jewel Street. I also want to talk about Unite Siloam and the petitions that are circulating to recall 2 of our conservative board members. On the group's website, they admit that they would like to recall all 4, but 2 are newly elected and not eligible for recall. I've reviewed Unite Siloam's internet presence, listened to the public comments they have given at board meetings, watched the various people involved, the other issues that they are for or against, who they interact with, who they fist bump when they leave the podium. And I've been trying to generally assess the core actors who are driving Unite Siloam. As a retired police officer, that's what I've learned to do. I evaluate people, I watch them, and I get a handle on the situation. What I see is that Siloam Springs is at a crossroads. Though this group of what appears to be left-leaning individuals is trying to make this all about the firing of Philip Patterson as city administrator, I'm convinced that they're really worried about that the conservative board will vote in a new city administrator who will be courageous enough to reject leftist agendas. We moved to Siloam Springs because of its conservative Christian values. Mr. Patterson was hired about the same time. I watched as Siloam Springs began to flirt with the woke and progressive side. The majority of Siloam residents don't want to see that happen. That's what's evident by the fact that they elected the 4 strong conservatives who voted to terminate Mr. Patterson's contract. There's no great mystery about the reason why. Mr. Patterson, he made it pretty clear in his parting letter, I think he got it right, the conservative board members are looking for a different leadership. It is not some little thing that's at stake. It's the slow erosion of communities. This is how states change, how nations change, and eventually how we create the world that we're going to leave for our grandchildren. All you have to do is look at what's happening in other parts of the country to see how far it can lead, and it's not over. If you think it can't happen here, then I would say that's just one step closer that we've taken to it happening. The few core individuals of Unite Siloam have unleashed a barrage of repetitious public comments against the conservative members of the board. For me, that is one of the best indicators that those board members made the right decision. When you knock down a hornet's nest, the hornets start swarming and stinging. It is an awful mental and emotional trial, and I applaud these members for being able to muster the strength to endure it. My fear is that some in Siloam are being lured into thinking this is about personalities, when it is really about keeping Siloam grounded in the conservative Christian family values that make it the wonderful place it is. If you sign one of the petitions and after consideration would like to have your name removed, I ask that you call the city clerk's office. Thank you for letting me talk.
Anyone else? If not, we will move on to our consent agenda, which is made up of the workshop minutes from May 2nd, the regular meeting minutes from May 2nd, and Resolution 2723 to set the hearing date for easement vacation of 224 and 302 South College Street. Are there any requests to have anything removed from the consent agenda? Is there any comments from the public on anything on the consent agenda? There being none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
I don't know.
I'll just put whoever I
Did you
want.
get it? Been moved and seconded. Roll call.
Carroll.
Yes.
Wiles.
Yes.
Arndt.
Yes.
Rissler.
Yes.
Allen.
Yes.
Blair.
Yes.
Motion passed. The next agenda item is our ordinances 2308. We have the amending Chapter 38 of the City Municipal Code, the sale and use of fireworks in the city limits. It is on the agenda for its third reading, and I will invite Chief Jeremy Kreiner to speak to our board about that.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and Board. Jeremy Kreiner, Fire Chief. Before you tonight's the third reading of the fireworks amendment. Just to recap, this amendment will reduce the number of days that fireworks are allowed by 1 day, and also reduce the number of hours that they are allowed to be shot off down to 10 p.m. as opposed to 11 p.m. or midnight, depending on which day it was. Each day would be at 10 o'clock. Staff has not had any comments since the last reading, and we are available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Is there any questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Mayor.
Call me Madam Mayor.
I almost did.
Lisa, go ahead.
I did have a citizen call and say, and I don't know if this is you or the chief that should answer this, but do you primarily know the neighborhoods that get the most calls, I should say? Even now, even after the ordinance changed?
Sure. From the fire perspective, there's nothing that's targeted to any certain neighborhood that we've been able to identify in our statistics. But, Chief.
When I sent you an email, Alan Gilbert, Chief of Police. I sent you an email, I think, last week, and on the top of the email, I put icons. I think there were 12 of them. If you click on those, that'll tell you exactly where the calls came from in the area. Does that help?
Yeah, I think the concern for the citizen is they're okay with the changes, but they want to make sure that we target getting information out in both English and Spanish, especially those primary neighborhoods that are the loudest. Like some say, oh, it sounds like a war zone here. And so I've gotten a couple of calls, well, more than a couple of calls about it. And I apologize if I have not read that part of the email. I missed the last meeting, and I haven't caught up. My 13-year-old nephew passed away, so I'm still trying to catch up from things. And so I will make sure and share that. But if we can make sure, because I'm pretty sure this will pass, but make sure that we send out, even in a mail out in the utilities, but make sure we target those areas that are primarily a concern for citizens.
And after the decision by the board, which way we go, one of the things I'll meet with my staff as we get closer to that date, and we will go over the areas that have the most complaints, and we'll make sure we'll saturate that area as much as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Mr. Vice Mayor. For Chief Kreiner, thank you for responding to our request for you to relook at this. I know we asked you to change this to begin with 3 or 4 years ago. Interesting, I'll try to make this a quick story, but I was with a group of people, and I said, hey, city business right now, fireworks in the city limits or not? And the initial response was no, overwhelming no. And I said, oh, okay, well, interesting, because when we were first considering this a few years ago, the response I got from a lot of people I asked then was, yeah, that'd be great, let's do it in the city limits. Well, then I said, well, the reason for the change was to alleviate some of the call-outs the police had to go on during the time when people are shooting off fireworks illegally, because we know they're going to shoot them off no matter what the ordinance is. At that
the response from everyone was, oh, so there was a reason for it. Oh, okay, we get it now. And I said, and so now we're looking at maybe reducing. Does that sound like a good compromise? Now, this particular group of people thought, yeah, that sounds like a good compromise, reducing it by a day or so and not going so late. So I'm in favor of the 3 days and not quite as late in the evening as we have been. It occurred to me today, this year July 4th is on Tuesday. So that would mean fireworks would be legal in the city Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Friday and Saturday are the weekend leading up to July 4th. What's going to happen then? I mean, that's when people tend to celebrate. Sometimes I had one person actually suggest, what if every year, and this would be hard, this would be a communication challenge, but what if every year the city council were to determine the 3-day window, which could even be broken up. But I don't know. Is there any thought on, are we still going to get a lot of illegal fireworks on Friday and Saturday? Because this year they won't be legal on Friday and Saturday? Or are we just going to get a lot more fireworks on nights that people go to work, but they'll be done by 10, so at least it won't be going late? Do you have any comments?
I would answer yes to all of those.
I know I'm just muddying the water here, but
It certainly is possible. It does create a communication challenge to make sure that all of that information is given out ahead of time and everyone understands that for an ordinance or law that's been in effect for years, sometimes people don't know
Right.
the rules and regs. So for it to change annually would create some challenges. But
Yeah. Well, I could see it going either way. I could see people just waiting until the 3 days. I mean, there's always going to be people that it doesn't matter what the ordinance is, but people waiting until the 3 days, and then those are work nights. Or I could see this year being 5 days, and you have extra calls because 2 of those days are Fridays and Saturdays. So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if any of the other board members have comments about that. I think probably the simplest thing this year would be to keep it as it is, and then see how it goes. Maybe relook at it again next year. Comments?
That's a great point. Mindy, that's a great point. Just out of curiosity, the people you had asked about, was it visitors from out of town or is it local people?
Local.
Okay.
Yeah, they were all local people that initially were like, no, we don't want fireworks in the city. This time around. Now, when I asked 4 years ago, everybody that I asked, I was surprised that they wanted fireworks in the city limits. But this time around, but with them going so late, I mean, it was late before, especially last year when Monday night was July 4th and Tuesday was back to work and people were being kept awake until midnight. So going back till 10 o'clock, I think is going to help. But yeah, this most recent group of people, they felt like the compromise was good. They initially wanted us to do away with fireworks, but then when they understood the reason, they thought, oh, well, we understand that. If this helps the police force be able to focus on other things during those 3 or 4 days, that's a good reason.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Used. So you're saying the ordinance is taking it to 3 days.
Right.
Because it's on Tuesday this year, you want it to be okay for 5 days.
No, I'm not saying that.
Or leave it alone. It's
I'm
4
saying leave it
days.
alone. I'm saying
The 1 day being Friday, whatever's done will be illegal.
this year, if we pass this ordinance amended the way it is, fireworks will be illegal on Friday and Saturday.
Right. So
That doesn't mean they're not going to happen, though.
yeah,
Th- and
it's
that
still
doesn't mean
gonna
they're
happen regardless.
Right.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
I'm not making any recommendations. I guess I'm just putting it out there. Have we considered this? And
When they fall on weird days like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, yeah. When you only have 3 days, it's going to be.
yeah.
That's a good point to bring up. And I agree with you, Mindy. It's something you probably got to look at every year.
So maybe this year, go with go with what you've suggested, because you've done a lot of hard work to make those recommendations, and then be ready for us to see how it goes and possibly look at it again next year. Hopefully, I know Megan is already aware that there's going to be a lot of communication going out. She's done a great job with all the communication about the changes with the kayak park, and so hopefully people will get those messages. And the main thing is that I want to encourage people to be respectful of your neighbors. Don't shoot off the things that you're so not supposed to shoot off, and be respectful of the dates and times that you are allowed to shoot off fireworks. That in itself will help everybody.
Chief, did you have anything?
Alan Gilbert, Chief of Police. This may help. I know we had a conversation the other day, and if you look at the email that I sent you, in 2018, on 4th of July, we had 34 calls to service for fireworks calls. The day before 4th of July, we had 6 calls. The day before that, we had 2 calls. The day after 4th of July, we had 3. The day after that, we had 5. Moving into 19, let's just, July 1st, we had 2 calls. The 3rd, we had 1 call. I'm sorry, the 1st, we had 2 calls. The 2nd, we had 1 call. On July 3rd, we had 2 calls. July 4th, we had 16 calls. Then the day after, on the 5th, 4 calls. The day after that, 4 calls. Moving into 20, once the ordinance came in, 2 calls on the 1st, 6 calls on the 2nd, 1 call on the 3rd, 3 calls on the 4th, 9 calls on the 5th, and on the 6th, 1 call. And then move in 21, on the 1st, no fireworks calls. On the 2nd, 3 fireworks calls. On the 3rd, 9 fireworks calls. On the 4th, 8 fireworks calls. On the 5th, 3, and the next day, 1. Then last year, we had no fireworks calls on the 1st, 4 on the 2nd, 7 on the 3rd, none on the 4th of July, 9 on the 5th, and 3 on the 6th. When we give those calls, the numbers that I showed you, our calls of service are still, even on the 4th. On the 4th, we're still answering 111 police calls in 18, 113 calls in 19, 70 calls in 20. On 21, we answered 84 police calls, and on 22, we answered 67 police calls. So that doesn't go in hand in hand with the fireworks call. So hopefully that helps your question a little bit. So we're not seeing just a huge jump before the 4th of July or after. We're minimum calls.
And my concern is more that it's a Friday and Saturday.
Yes, ma'am. It is a strange year with it being on Tuesday, but I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Mr. Vice Mayor.
Anyone else with the board? Pardon, Lisa? Okay, go ahead.
Can you remind us the dates that they can sell fireworks in city limits?
I don't have it in front of me.
Is it part of the?
It's not changing from what was previously in the ordinance, but it's usually about a 2-week window.
It's a 2-week window.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will be off on the 4th to celebrate on the 4th. Most companies allow employees to be off on that day. So, okay. That's all I was wondering.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Is there anyone in the public who wishes to address Ordinance 2308? If not, anyone else up here? I'll entertain a motion to place Ordinance 2308 on its 3rd reading, suspending the rules and reading title only.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Isles,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Bisler,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
Motion passed. Do I hear a motion to adopt Ordinance 20? Oh, sorry, Christina. That's right.
Ordinance 23-08, an ordinance amending Chapter 38, Article 4 of the Siloam Springs City Code with respect to regulation of the sale and use of fireworks in city limits.
Thank you, Christina. Do I hear a motion to adopt ordinance 2308?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Hunt,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Wiles.
Yes.
Motion passed. Our next agenda item is letter E, ordinance 2310. The amending section 102-21 of the city municipal code, rezoning from A1 to PD, the 2000 block of East Tahlequah Street. We have the second reading, and I believe Ben is briefing the board on that.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor and members of the board. Ben Rhodes, Senior Planner. Before you is the second reading for the rezone of 4.39 acres. This is going from A1 agricultural to PD plan development. Since the last reading, staff has not received any additional comments on the proposal. Staff and the Planning Commission continue to recommend approval, and we're available for any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Is there any questions or comments from the board? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address ordinance 2310? Please come up and state your name and address.
Paul Sims. I work for SWIP Consulting at 7 Halstead Circle in Rogers. We're the engineer for the project.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, what was your name?
Paul Sims.
Thank you.
I'd like to request that the second and third reading be combined.
We try to discourage that, Mr. Sims, when there is any change in property, zoning, or anything like that, but it is up to the board.
Okay. Thank you for your consideration. If you have any questions about the development, I'm happy to answer whatever you have. Just let me know. Thank you.
Is there any other comments from the public? If not, I will entertain a motion to place ordinance 2310 on its second reading, suspending the rules and reading title only.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Whistler,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Wiles,
Yes.
Hunt.
Yes.
Motion passed. Pardon?
Ordinance number 23-10, an ordinance amending section 102-21 of the Siloam Springs Municipal Code, city zoning map, rezoning from A1 to PD, property located at the 2000 block of East Tahlequah Street.
Thank you, Christina. If there's no other motions on that, then we will move to ordinance 2311. The first reading, the annexation of 10 acres at 2603 South Lincoln Street. Megan Thomas, you're going to brief the board.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Let me get to the slide real quick. Okay. This is an annexation request to annex in 10 acres located at 2603 South Lincoln Street as R2 residential medium and C2 roadway commercial. There is an associated final plat with this request that will be forthcoming. On the screen is the annexation map for this request. You can see the site is located just south of the commercial South Point subdivision. And this is the future land use map. The future land use map is calling for neighborhoods 1 for this property. Therefore, the proposed R2 zoning to the east portion of the lot is in line with the future intent of the property. Shown on this map is where the proposed C2 lots will be. While C2 is not in line with the future land use map designation, staff feels that an exception should be made for these 2 lots since the previously approved preliminary plat, which showed these 2 lots as commercial, was approved prior to the implementation of the new 2040 future land use map. Staff also feels that the future land use map amendment is not needed for the same reasoning. And this is the overall site view of the property. You can see the annexation is for the entirety of the lot. However, the associated final plat will only be for the portion outlined in blue. Staff is recommending approval of this request with no needed conditions, and staff is available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
Yes, Betsy?
So why is it being annexed now rather than before the development started?
They submitted the annexation with the final plat, but their final plat is currently pending either a final inspection passed or a performance bond.
Okay.
And so they had to withdraw their final plat this time because they're not ready to proceed with that. But their annexation was still ready to go at that point.
Okay, and so my understanding is, like any new additions have to have 2 ways to get in and out. Is that correct?
So I think that's for fire. Is that correct? I'll let him speak to that.
Okay.
Thank you. Jeremy Kreiner, Fire Chief. It really depends on what the development is. It depends on the number of residential units within that development. So if there's under a certain number, then it does not have to, or if the size of the development is under a certain area, then it would not have to have 2 ways in.
Okay,
Or 2 ways
so
out.
is this smaller than those requirements?
Yes, the final plat that's under review now does meet our requirements.
Okay, so that's the blue spot.
Correct. Yes.
Is it going to continue to the east? That might be. Yeah, sorry.
So the preliminary plat is only for the area outlined in blue. Same with the final plat for it. So we don't know what their plans are for the east portion of the lot at this time.
Ben might.
Not to contradict Megan, but the preliminary plats for the entire red area, so that the, if I would draw it out, there will be a cul-de-sac that goes all the way out like that. So this is just for the first couple of phases. They're doing the final plat by phases.
Okay.
So right now we're just doing the final plat for the blue section. Then when they finish out the rest of the cul-de-sac, then they'll come back for another final plat for the back part.
So the rest of it, is that going to require that to?
It will not. It's under the amount. Because when the preliminary plat came in, it was for the entire addition.
Okay.
So we looked at it at that time, and they did not require a second
Okay.
connection.
So even though they're just now being annexed in, all the same requirements are for them as if they'd already been annexed in?
The requirements for the preliminary plat apply regardless of whether they're in the city or outside the city limits, because they're in their 1 mile planning area boundary.
Okay.
So the annexation is just required because they're abutting. So before we extend utilities to them, they have to annex.
Okay.
That's per city policy. So
Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
So Ben, did you say that the preliminary plat, including all the way, has been approved?
yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address Ordinance 2311? If not, I will bring it back to the board. Do I hear a motion to place Ordinance 2311 on its first reading, suspending the rules and reading title only?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Allen,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Wiles,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Chrysler.
Yes.
Motion passed. Christina?
Ordinance number 23-11, an ordinance accepting the annexation of certain territory having the address of 2603 South Lincoln Street to the city of Siloam Springs, Arkansas, and assigning same to a ward.
Our next agenda item is Ordinance 2312, the first and only reading as a sole source with Stinson. Steve Gorczyk is going to talk to us about that.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the board. Steve Gorzek, Public Works Director. The staff memo or the staff report that's in your board packet, I'll admit, was rather lengthy, but it covered a lot of years. So rather than going through that entire report, I decided might be easier for everybody if I just cut to some of the highlights of this whole thing. One of which I didn't even mention in the staff report, and that begins with the fact that any wastewater plant in any state is required to have a permit through the state regulatory agency. With us, it's the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality, and I'm going to refer to them as ADEQ from here on out, rather than having to say all that again. Wastewater characteristics that are monitored or have to be monitored, and the monitoring and reporting frequency depends on the size of the plant. Any wastewater plant that discharges more than 1 million gallons a day is considered a major discharger, and that's where we happen to fall in. Our plant is currently treating on average of just over 4 million gallons a day. So we're considered a major discharger, meaning we have more things that we have to monitor for, and I call them pollutants because I've been in this. This is how I started out in public works. I was a wastewater guy, so you can call it chemicals, you can call it constituents. I call them pollutants because basically that's what it is. Wastewater plants are just lowering the level of pollutants that go to the stream. So things that are monitored are what's called conventional pollutants, which is the organic makeup of the wastewater. Then there's what's called total suspended solids, which is they're solids that are not dissolved in the water. They don't settle out in the water, they just stay suspended. So the idea of a treatment plant is to reduce that, along with the organic content, which is known as biochemical oxygen demand, or BOD. And then two more conventional, well, really not pollutants. One is pH. Every wastewater plant typically discharges or is required to discharge in the range of 6 to 9. Our treatment plant discharges between 7 and 7.5. So 7 being neutral, we're slightly above neutral, which is fine. And then the last is flow. We have to monitor flow on a regular basis. We monitor for more other things besides that, and I'll get into that here in just a minute. But the bigger the plant, the more things you have to monitor for. As an example, Gentry doesn't have to monitor for as many things as we do because we're just a larger plant. When the permits are issued by the state, which is typically every 5 years, they must be reviewed and approved by EPA before they become effective. And for those of you who are not familiar, EPA is the Environmental Protection Agency. The state comes up with a draft permit. EPA reviews the permit. They decide whether they like it or not. If they do, then they send it back to the state and say, go ahead and issue it. If not, then they'll send a letter of rejection. Well, we're in the second category with a letter of rejection, and I'll go into that in just a minute. The debate, there's been a debate for greater than 10 years. I've been here almost 10, and it was already going on when I got here, between the states of Arkansas and Oklahoma, primarily related to phosphorus. Treatment plants, not all, but there are a lot of treatment plants that have to regulate the amount of phosphorus that gets discharged to the stream. Our permit has a limit of 1 part per million, and since we discharge into Sager Creek, which winds up into Flint Creek, and then ultimately in the Illinois River, close to Lake Tenkiller, Oklahoma says 1's not good enough, and Oklahoma is wanting to propose a limit of 0.035. For any wastewater plant that's not attainable naturally with biological treatment and even some chemical addition like we're doing, We're currently going out to the stream at about half a part per million, and sometimes even less than that. But I said 0.037, sorry. There's no way we're going to meet that without additional treatment. So a draft permit was issued by ADEQ, and the city received it in November of 2022. The city staff commented on the draft and sent it back to the state. So then from there, the state sends it over to EPA. And by this time, Oklahoma had backed off on the phosphorus limit. But then we found out that when EPA reviewed the draft permit, they came back with a letter of denial. And this was not until February of this year. One of the primary things that they were denying was that the state was proposing a phosphorus limit of 0.83, I believe it was. I put it in the staff report. Yes, 0.83 parts per million. So slightly less than we're discharging now, but 0.8 or 0.83 is a level that is attainable. We can do that, and we can do it with a margin for error, because the plant is going to run good most of the time, but just like us, we get upset every now and then, get a stomach ache or what have you. The treatment plant gets a stomach ache too, so because it eats a lot of stuff. So we will be able to maintain that 0.83. However, 0.37 is not, still can't do that without going through a lot of expense. And a lot of expense is, it can be done, but it's going to eliminate or at least lessen the margin for error considerably. And rough estimate to treat just for phosphorus, we're looking at probably close to $20 million. So, you know, we're going to remove phosphorus. We're going to move practically everything down to almost drinking water quality by the time we discharge to the stream. There are two other entities that are going through a similar situation. One is the city of Springdale. They're running into problems with EPA as well on their discharge permit. And then there's another one called NACA, which stands for the Northwest Arkansas Conservation Authority. They're not a municipal treatment plant, but they do take wastewater from municipalities. There's one city, Cave Springs, is going to be discharging all their wastewater to the NACA plant rather than having to upgrade their treatment facility. NACA also takes some wastewater from Bentonville, but not all of it. Bentonville did look at piping all of their wastewater discharge to the NACA plant, but they discovered that in order to upgrade their treatment plant, it was going to cost $90 million, but to run a pipeline to NACA was going to cost $120 million. So they decided they're going to go ahead and upgrade their treatment plant. Nevertheless, these two plants are having a similar issue that we encountered with EPA. So ADEQ has decided that rather than trying to argue back and forth that we're going to the state is going to go into litigation with EPA and say we disagree. Our lawyers are going to get involved, and we're going to talk this out. So DEQ had called our city attorney and asked if we would be interested in getting in on this litigation as well, which brings up the Ordinance 2312. It would allow us to hire the law firm of Stinson to work on our behalf in this litigation. Stinson is a very well known environmental law firm. They deal with a lot of environmental matters, and they've worked with us since I've been here. I've worked with them twice, and they've worked with the city for almost 20 years. So they're well known, they're well liked, they do a good job. So staff's recommending that they be sole sourced, not only because of that, but because in this this letter of rejection that EPA sent, they said you have a certain amount of time before we will automatically put these regulations into effect. So that deadline is May 25th. So that's next week. So that's the purpose of not only the sole source going with Stinson, but also the emergency to be able to get Stinson hired in order to work with us and get a letter and work with the state's attorney as well, so that we can get this ball rolling. So staff recommends that the board approve Ordinance 2312 and stands available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Just for public clarification, legal representation or professional services is one of the few expenses a city can give without doing a bidding process by state law, and so that's why it is listed as sole source on the agenda. Is there any questions from the board? Any questions from the public on Ordinance 2312? If not, I'll entertain a motion to place 2312 on its first and only reading, suspending the rules and reading title only.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Blair,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Wiles,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Rissler,
Yes.
Allen.
Yes. Does Christina need to read that?
Yes.
No, there's nothing to read, is there?
Yes.
Ordinance number 2312,
Oh,
an
which is-
ordinance authorizing purchase of legal services from the Stinson firm LLC without soliciting requests for qualifications and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Christina. Do I hear a motion to adopt 2312?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Carroll,
Yes.
Wiles,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Rissler,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Blair.
Yes.
Now I will entertain a motion to pass the emergency clause on Ordinance 2312.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the emergency clause? Roll call.
Wiles,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Rissler,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
Motion passed. Next agenda item is Ordinance 2313, the first reading on the Personnel Authority. Christina, do you wish to give us a briefing, please?
I received a request to place this on the board's agenda for discussion at the board level.
Okay. Is there any board discussion? Anyone?
Mr. Vice Mayor? I was the one who requested it, and basically, whether to edit it, pass it, fail it, I wanted the board to have a chance to talk about it, and see if it was something they wanted to proceed with. A couple reasons for it would be, like, if a new person comes in, it helps protect the employees from somebody coming in and cleaning house. It also makes it so one single person doesn't have so much control over everything. And the school board, actually the school board's an example, their board has to approve every single hire and fire all the way down the line. So I'm open to discussion and whatever y'all think would be the best way to go. Another thought I had on it today, and I want to preface it with, it has nothing to do with Christina or personal at all, that then I also wondered if when we have an interim, I know we have one now, we could have one again in 5 or 10 years, if that's an example where it would be good. So if somebody in the interim position, has to run it by the board before they make any major changes. That was just another thought. So those are all my thoughts at the moment.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
I was just going to say, you're saying the school board has to approve every employee? Like down to an assistant or janitor or anybody? Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah, Ken, go ahead.
A couple of things. I just want to make sure, because this is a little different, but this is treated like a normal ordinance, right? We'll have 3 readings? Okay. And the reason I'm asking, I have had some questions and concerns about this. I reached out to a consulting firm who deals in this kind of things with cities across the country, and got some very good answers to the questions that I had, although that caused me to have even more questions. And so, honestly, I was coming in today to ask that this be tabled, but since we're going to have 3 readings, I'm not going to do that because that will still allow me the time to get some more answers to my new questions. So, that being the case, I'm just going to shut up, and I'll reserve my comments probably until the next meeting, till I have a little bit more information to present. Thank you.
Now, if you wanted to amend or something between meetings, you can do that.
Okay. As soon as I can get a little bit more information, I'll feel a lot more comfortable moving forward than I do right now.
And Mr. Vice Mayor, also, I know my name was taken off of it, and now I'm referenced. It doesn't seem appropriate to me to have one board member or referenced when I see this as a group decision. I don't want the authority to make these decisions on my own, nor do I have that authority. So, I mean, that's something else I'd like to see it just like a regular ordinance, if the board chooses to adopt it. So,
Mr. Vice Mayor,
Yes, Lisa.
I have a couple of questions. I'm sorry, I'm looking at this on my phone. It says, whereas a board member has requested an ordinance to return to the board's personnel authority to its pre-2017 status regarding the fire chief. Can you explain can you define what the pre-2017 status was, and did it only include the fire chief?
The pre-2017 status only included the fire chief,
Okay.
and it only included approval of the hire. So like the city administrator would hire, and then the board would confirm that hire. And that was all that there was included in that ordinance, and up until 2017 when it was repealed.
Okay. And was there any previous versions before that? Because it seems like when I was a board of director, a lot went through the board. I mean, when I was a city employee, a lot went through the board. No?
No.
Okay. I was just curious. And then it says down here, and such other, it's talking about, provided, however, that the appointments and termination of the police chief, finance director, information technology manager, city clerk, and such other positions as may be provided by ordinance. What are these other positions? Wouldn't you have to list them in the ordinance?
There are already ordinances that exist for the board's authority over the city administrator and for confirming the hiring of the city attorney.
Okay, I just need clarification on this. I do see the point of with the new city administrator coming in, and I think that it should help the employees know that their department heads will not just be replaced just because somebody new comes in. I could see the comfort in that. And so,
Anyone else?
Vice Mayor. I'd like to ask Jay Williams his thoughts on how this was looked at, probably from an AML level.
Thank you. Well, my response is to say I agree with the AML's position on this, that when directors get involved in personnel issues, it does open them up to liability, both on a personal level and as a public official. It potentially creates liability for the city if a personnel decision were to go bad, so to speak, and draw a lawsuit that would be successful. Again, that raises the possibility of liability. Now, that's not something that is going to happen every time, but it just increases the possibility of something like that happen. And so their advice is that to the extent possible, governing bodies should stay out of personnel matters. And I think that's sound advice, and I agree.
Else, Reed?
Yes, I'm not quite certain on the reasoning for just a few directors and a manager when we have others. I felt there was inconsistency with that, and as it stands right now with the liability factor and such, I'm not in favor of this.
Anyone else?
Mr. Vice Mayor.
Yes, Ben.
Thank you. I've also started doing some research, which has involved asking some questions of AML attorneys, and I have yet to hear back from them, but I just started that yesterday. So I'm glad we have a couple more readings with this as well. I did understand John Wilkerson with AML at our last meeting indicate what you just said about kind of warning us not to get involved in personnel matters, which this does seem like it may be getting involved in personnel matters. And I too am a little thrown off by this particular list, some specifics and not, and then other more general positions. So I guess I would need some clarification on that. But I'm also just interested in the history. If anybody has any history, I started looking around at what other city administrator form of governments do, and we're one of only three: Fort Smith, Barling, and Siloam. Our code, as it is now, is exactly the way Fort Smith's reads. And theirs was adopted in 2013. So this was prior to our last city administrator. I mean, our code came in existence in 2013, but the wording of it was prior to our former city administrator, because Fort Smith adopted that same wording in 2013, and then we adopted it in 2017. But do you have any history of either one of you of why that change was made back in 2017? I'm assuming there was a reason. Just like we are elected officials that are elected to represent the citizens, so were the board members at that time. I mean, so I'm sure they were trying to do their best that they could. So was there a reason?
Sure. There were some questions by the board when this came up, that they said, we're being asked to confirm the hiring of the fire chief. We don't do that with the police chief or basically any other director other than the city attorney. So why are we doing it here? And I do believe that there was a presentation, the AML was consulted, and a presentation was done at that time, which again basically said that it's just a liability concern for boards to be involved. They recommended that we do away with that provision, and the board at that time agreed unanimously.
I do appreciate wanting to protect our current city employees from a new city administrator who may want to come in and make some changes. But do we have any kind of process? I'm assuming we do have some sort of process in place that offers that protection anyway. I can't imagine that a city administrator could just come in and say, I don't want that person, I don't want that person, I don't want that person, without some sort of pretty significant process in place?
HR law allows them to eliminate any position they want or to terminate any position they want. That's federal. And then Arkansas is an at-will state.
So a city administrator could come in and start eliminating positions.
They could, however,
Okay.
staff does have the opportunity to file a grievance, and if they do file a grievance, that would come back to the board of directors.
Okay.
If it's against the city administrator. That's in our current handbook.
Christina, can you provide the board the grievance policy?
Certainly.
In an email later, please?
But generally, I understand that Arkansas is an at-will employment state, but generally there are still processes and policies in place that make it difficult, make it a little bit more difficult, I would.
They don't even have to have a trail of write-up or anything. If they want to walk in an office and terminate, they can.
It's not uncommon for a new mayor or a new city administrator, city manager, any more than it is a CEO of a new company to come in and replace department heads, whatever. It's done all the time.
But you will get us
Those
that
people
grievance
report
policy.
to him, she, her, whatever, and they want the people that they wish to have.
I just respond briefly. I mean, yes, that is possible. Where the liability concern arises is if that person is in some protected class because of their sex, their age, their race, their religion, any of those things. If a termination is made, it is incumbent upon the person making the termination to show that it was for a cause other than their protected status. And so if there would be, again, someone comes in, wants to clean house, they can do that, but it is important that anyone being affected that could potentially have cause to sue under state or federal law, that they actually provide cause, despite the fact that we are an at-will state. So that's where things can potentially get tricky when it comes to, hiring and firing, is have to take into account, whether candidates or a particular employee, do they fit in one of those classes or not? And, if so, can you demonstrate that the reason to fire them or not to hire them in the first place was for some reason other than the fact that they are in one of those classes? So, again, it is possible, again, for someone to come in and just terminate, but there are strings attached, and that's just something to be aware of.
Vice Mayor.
Hang on just a minute. Jay, I would think that would give cause for the board to be a backup or the final say for someone that may come in, new CEO, new city administrator come in and not know employment law, not know federal law, not know that these things can occur, and just say, pack your desk up, leave right now, with the board required to approve that termination, then you've got 7 board members that can say, hold on a minute. You, as a CEO, have to convince our board that there's a reason to be sending this person out, instead of just having the CEO just make that decision on their own and possibly make the mistake that you're talking about that could lead to a lawsuit. May not be anything in the record, but the precedence has been that 4 positions beside the administrator were approved by the board. And past administrators have dealt with that. Past city clerks have dealt with that. But I'm sure, you know, I'll just be called a liar for that because I made it up. No, there's precedence for it. And in fact, the fire chief was not the only one. The question I have here, Jay, based upon what you're stating, the risk involved, why has the city attorney been left as it is? It's not been changed like the fire chief was changed in 2017. Why was the city attorney left as it is, that it has to be approved by the city board of directors?
That is something I could not tell you. That's a board decision, and for whatever reason, it's never come before the board as long as I've been here.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
Yes.
I do have one other question of clarification. I'm still a little confused about the specific positions named. But the recommendation is that hiring and firing of whatever positions end up being left in this proposed ordinance are subject to the approval of the board. That's it's not asking that the board be involved in all of the hiring and firing decisions. It's that those decisions by a city administrator would be subject to. And so does that mean that subject to, does that mean every firing will come to us, or will there be certain that will and certain that won't, because it's just
The ones listed.
I think that's why it takes this being the approval of hiring and termination takes it out of the board not being involved in personnel, because the CEO is still making that determination. The board is simply having to be convinced of either or, the termination or the hiring, and giving approval on those positions every time they're hired or fired.
Okay.
But it's like it's being brought to the board, and the board has to vote if they approve it.
But I guess I understood John Wilkerson saying even the approval, even us saying yay or nay on that gets us involved in the process.
I didn't understand that when he spoke. I understood him to say that us going to the administrator and demanding someone be fired, that's getting involved in personnel.
And those are some of the questions. That's why I reserve my final comments until the next couple of meetings, because I'll certainly have heard from them by then.
Vice Mayor.
Did you have some?
Yeah, I wasn't at the last meeting, so if there was conversation I missed, I apologize. But it says on here, except as otherwise provided by law, and except for his or her own job position, the city administrator shall have full power and responsibility concerning the employment, disciplining, and termination of employment of all non-elected officials and uniformed and non-uniformed employees of the city. So that tells me the city administrator is doing all personnel, no matter what, taking care of that. But according to the budget of the position, level of compensation established from time to time, provided, however, that the appointment so it's saying, provided that, however, the appointment and termination of the police chief, just these people listed, but otherwise we have no responsibility, no personnel responsibility. Is that correct, Jay? We wouldn't be involved in personnel. We would just say yes or no. Yes, we agree with the termination with the information you provided, or no, we didn't. Because we're really not involved in the day-to-day. We're just involved in...
No, not in the day-to-day, but approving or even considering, if you have the authority to approve or disapprove hiring or firing, you would definitely be involved in in personnel as to that particular employee.
How are we involved in it?
If you have the power to confirm or not whether someone is hired or fired, that is just per se involved in their employment. I don't see any way around it.
So would that not go back to the same thing you were talking about on discrimination? Of course, they could file with the EEOC, there's so many avenues for them, but would that not also cause another level of protection for the city and the citizens for the tax dollars that we would have to spend in any lawsuit against us?
Well, I'll say in a perfect world, yes. But in the real world, boards, commissions, committees make mistakes. Politics enter in. There are all sorts of outside influences that can come into play, and the decisions that are reached are not always done strictly on the basis of law or policy. Again, it should be, but I just historically speaking, I'm not talking about this board in particular, but looking at just the history of employment, and again, when elected officials get involved, politics tend to enter the equation. And so employment decisions are sometimes made, again, on criteria that are not the recommended legal criteria. I'll just say that.
So have we ever had in the history of Siloam anybody come against that policy? Because previously we did make that decision for the fire chief, it's obvious. And I know some people feel like it has been other positions in the past. I'm a past city employee. What I remember, I'm not going to say is for sure because I'd have to go back, but what I remember, if I had a grievance with the police chief, because I came up from the fire department, from the police department, I could take it to the board for the board to take care of. I didn't have to go to the city administrator. So, have we ever had a history of somebody making a complaint against the city against unlawful practice of employment decisions by the board?
Not in the time I've been here. I'm not aware of that. Again, there's been very few instances that have come before the board in that time, and it's because the authority of the board is so limited when it comes to personnel. So no, I'm not aware of that. They say, ever in history, I do know from talking to people who were here a lot longer than I have been, such as Peggy Woody, who was the city clerk for many, many years, Mustan Pook, the mayor, who was here for many, many years. And when I came here and talking about the history of Siloam, and how we came to have be one of the very few cities with city administrator government. And I was told in no uncertain terms, it was for the very purpose of getting the then city council out of the hiring and firing of city employees. There had been a number of incidents where you had a mayor would fire somebody, the board or the council would hire them back, they'd get fired again, back and forth, and there were just a number of those incidents, and eventually there was enough dissatisfaction with that process and the politics of it all that the citizens moved for a change of government to the city administrator form, where we would have a board that would have very little say in personnel matters. And so that's how that came about. But since then, no, I'm not aware of any suits or actions that have been brought against the board.
Okay. Is it a state statute that we are not to? And if it is a state statute, what was the history that brought that statute about?
I'm not aware of the history of the statute on how the city administrator form of government, how that law was passed by the legislature. That's going back a ways.
So it is a state statute.
But yeah, there's a state statute, and it doesn't prohibit the board from having a say. So I mean, if that were the case, yeah, this would be a non-starter. It does, but it basically says that the city administrator will have authority over personnel, except as the board may reserve to itself, or words to that effect. I can't quote it exactly, and it's not in front of me here to read. But basically, it puts personnel authority, in the hands of the administrator, except, as the board may choose for itself.
Okay, so it leaves it open for it to be our decision.
Yeah, that's correct.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I think I do have that state statute. It's 14-48-117 in parentheses 1. And the statement that I am assuming Fort Smith used to come up with their ordinance in 2013 that then we must have used as ours in 2017 is, to the extent that such authority is vested in him or her through ordinance enacted to the Board of Directors, he or she may supervise and control all administrative departments, agencies, offices, and employees. And so I'm guessing that Fort Smith took that information and created their ordinance that is the one that we ended up adopting.
But we can end up with our own. It doesn't have to match.
That's a question that I have for confirmation, but putting the puzzle pieces together, I think that's probably where that came from.
Thank you. That does help, though. I appreciate it.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
That's it.
So the school board has to approve all the hiring and firing. Does that mean that they're all subject to liability?
I am not familiar with the law as it applies to school boards, whether they may have some exemption or immunity or anything of that, but I would say in the absence of some particular immunity that has been granted under law, then yes, potentially they do have that liability. Yes.
That's a presumed liability, right? Because we don't have any facts to prove that case has never been tried.
I'm not familiar enough with the school board to say.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
I'm talking about city government.
Well,
presumed.
Right, but I mean, no, for the city, no, that has not come up.
It was in Mr. Wilkinson's workshop last time that I think he mentioned a case out of maybe Conway, El Dorado, okay, where someone felt like he or she had been wrongfully terminated, and then I believe I'm getting this right, and then the board got involved, and then they somehow became liable with all that. I don't know all the facts, but he gave a story.
So do you kind of remember?
And I asked for that to be emailed to the board, and we still have not received it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was it because a board member requested it, or is it because they were just approving the city administrators or mayor? I don't
know. No, they're not. But it was a case where the city board ended up getting involved in I guess approving a firing, and somehow they became personally liable individually. But yeah, we're supposed to be sent that case, so we'll have more information about it when we get it.
I think it's Lee Park versus Russellville et al.
Oh, yeah. You're right. I have my handout from last week. So if you want to look it up.
Oh.
Well, I asked for him to send us a summary of the case.
Can I get a copy of that?
Arkansas Code 14-48-120. Oh, no. Then he just referred to the El Dorado case. So he didn't give us any information other than a reference to it.
What he spoke about in that the way I took it from his description was that either a board member or multiple board members had actually gotten involved in giving direction on individual employees to the city administrator or whoever was in charge. Jay, you're absolutely right. The form of government was changed because the mayor at the time was firing the police chief, and the board was hiring him back, and he'd get mad at the police chief and fire him again, and even violated a court order to leave the police chief alone. And it was on the front page of the paper so many times, and such a story of really what the board at the city council said at the time was harassment. And they ended up changing the form of government through a public vote. But from everything I understood at the time was that was the reason the board as a whole had the final say on hiring and firing of police chief, fire chief, city clerk, city attorney. That the city administrator had full authority by state law to do all hiring and firing, but for those positions only, because of their past experience, the city board had to approve. And it was done for a long time. May not have been put in ordinances or voted on or anything, but that was the procedure. So there was a reason for it based upon what had gone on when it was a mayor council form of government. Anybody else on the board have any questions? Anyone from the public have a comment or question about Ordinance 2313? No. So back to the board. Is there a motion to put Ordinance 2313 on its first reading, suspending the rules and reading title only?
So moved.
Second.
Where it goes.
Was there a motion and a second? Who
I
did
seconded
you
it.
second it? Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Hunt,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Carroll,
No.
Wiles.
Yes.
So, motion passed. Christina?
Ordinance number 23-13, an ordinance amending portions of Ordinance 17-17 with respect to personnel authority of the city administrator and appointment of the fire chief and granting hiring and firing approval to the board over certain positions.
We will now move to our staff reports. The only thing we have is the administrator report, Christina.
So expenditures in excess of $30,000 included $30,662 for a police department Tahoe, $31,162 for an additional police Tahoe, and $41,162 for another police Tahoe. And the board had previously approved $84,216.75 for the consoles for the dispatch center, and $109,067 for the mixers and recycle pumps for the wastewater plant. There were no purchases per Resolution 61-21. The summer all city employee meeting was enjoyed by all on May 5th at Fire Station 1, and I'd like to give a thanks out to staff and the board members who participated in hosting the event. I attended a bulkhead installation demonstration at the Woka construction site. And basically, it was to show that GRDA equipment could be used to place the bulkheads into the guide channels, which means they'll no longer have to rent equipment to place the bulkheads. And in times of drought, this will ensure that the river level is sufficient for the city's water supply at our intake. As an update, the issue of the Manna Center has not been forgotten. Staff have been waiting for information needed to complete the agreement, and we anticipate that will be on the next agenda. This Friday, May 19th, to celebrate National Police Week, the city is hosting Coffee with a Cop at Starbucks from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And the first Fourth Friday will kick off May 26th in Memorial Park. A special ceremony will take place at 6:30 p.m., honoring those who have served our great nation, and all active and retired military personnel and their families are invited to join us. And at 7 p.m., the Shannon Worst Band will take the stage for a concert at the Chautauqua Amphitheater. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And now it's time for the director's reports, and we'll just start with Reed and move around, and I'll go last. Reed?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Congratulations to all the, I'll say, young people. I'm sure there's a few that are not quite so young that are graduating this spring. An accomplishment of years of hard work, I'm sure. Looking forward to what the summer has in store for us as a city, with what is happening with our Fourth Fridays, engagements we've had with Main Street, just what all is happening. We have a wonderful place to live in. I'm glad to be a part of Siloam Springs, and I'm ready for summertime. Thank you.
Thank you, Reed. Mindy?
Okay. I was just getting this information from the American Legion Siloam Post 29 will be placing flags on grave sites this Saturday morning. That's May 20th, and all are invited to help. I've gone a couple of years, and actually the football team has been there to, the Siloam Springs football team has been there to help with both the flags of Memorial Day and the wreaths at Christmas, and it's gone really quickly with all those guys helping, but I'm sure they would appreciate any extra help. Looking forward to Fourth Friday, and I want to thank all those involved, the Chamber, Main Street, city representatives, lots of people working to bring this new event to Siloam, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I understand there are already 40 vendors that have committed to the first Fourth Friday. And then the concert will be that night too, the concert that Christina just mentioned. So I'm excited about that. So there's been a lot of talk about what's been going on in the city the last few months. It's been a challenging time. I myself have gotten calls from both sides of the political spectrum and everyone in between about what's been going on, especially in relation to the city administrator issue. I personally voted my conscience. Didn't have to do with my political beliefs. It was my conscience. What's done is done. And now we're moving on as best as we can. Moving on means different things to different people. And I think we have to respect that that does mean different things for different people. Moving on for some has meant coming to the city board meetings and expressing their concerns, their opinions, their frustrations, and they're entitled to do so. You may not agree with their concerns, their opinions, but everyone's entitled to come to the meetings. Everyone's encouraged to come to the meetings, and I appreciate all of you who have been at the meetings and have expressed your concerns and opinions and frustrations and suggestions and encouragement and anything. So thank you. Keep coming. We do want to hear from you. I know it's been a difficult time. I am thankful for those of you who have been here. Or that have reached out. And I'm also I know that God's in control of the situation. And a song that has come to, as I've listened to my Pandora station, every once in a while, a song that comes on that I just really appreciate the words to, that has given me a lot of encouragement and that hope that God is in control, is a song by Chris Tomlin. And it's called God of the City. And I won't sing it for you, but I will read just a few of the lyrics. You're the God of this city. You're the King of these people. You're the Lord of this nation. You are. You're the light in this darkness. You're the hope to the hopeless. You're the peace to the restless. You are. There is no one like our God. For greater things have yet to come, and greater things are still to be done in this city. Greater things have yet to come, and greater things are still to be done in this city.
Ken?
I want to congratulate the graduating class of 2023, as Reed mentioned. When he had mentioned that, it just brought to mind. I know one young man who every day is an adventure, and he is so excited about what lies ahead, and that is so refreshing to see, all the young people. And Kevin, I think you're part of that right now, and that's wonderful. And again, I just want to say congratulations to them, and good luck as they embark on the next chapter. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Ken. Betsy?
One thing earlier I forgot to mention when we were talking about fireworks is, and I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but I thought I'd throw it out there, is what about taking it to a public vote at some point? I mean, would that be, oh, okay. Just, I didn't know if at a regular election, so, okay. Senior Center, as usual, this week, or next week, the 25th, their outing is to Crystal Bridges. So if you haven't checked out the Senior Center and all the cool stuff and fun trips they have, you might want to do that. That's really it. Congratulations to Kevin and all the people out there who have graduated, whether they're graduating from high school or college or whatever it is. So it's an exciting time. That's it.
Do they measure senior by age or?
Do what?
Refer to Kevin.
No. I was talking about the Senior Activity Center.
Oh, the senior. I just suddenly, because one of us just turned 55 last week. So in some circles, I'm a senior now.
That's what I was wondering.
Cheap food at restaurants.
That's what I wondered.
I think the senior center is 60 years old. Does anybody? I think that's their age limit. I'm getting a head nod. I think it's 60 years old. They have lunches every day throughout the week. They have painting classes, exercise equipment. They really do a lot of fun stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you, Betsy.
Welcome.
Lisa?
Yeah, congratulations to anyone that's graduating. But Kevin, I'm going to point out, because Kevin is at our meetings every week. He doesn't miss unless he's on vacation or sick. He comes to every meeting. He has for years. And so congratulations on getting your degree. I want to say thank you. So my family's been going through a difficult time. We had a 13-year-old nephew pass away a couple of weeks ago. We had to travel out of town, and this community, anytime we go through anything, has been amazing. A lot of people have sent text and cards. We even received cards in the mail just with the condolences, and I can't say thank you enough. And so that tells you what kind of community we have. The selection committee, or I don't even know what we're supposed to call the committee, the ones that's going to refer who they would like to see interview for the city administration position. We met May 10th at 1 p.m. We had 28 applications so far as of May 10th. I don't know if any's been received since then, but as of May 10th, we've received 28 applications. 11, they want to have interviews with 11 of them. So they will be video interviews to stay consistent. None of them will be brought in. And then they will make suggestions from there. Some just didn't qualify at all, didn't have even the basic qualifications. So do you guys, I have had some questions. When do the board of directors want to receive have you guys received any applications? When do you want to receive applications?
All we've received is a list of names
Of
who has applied, that's all.
Okay, so when do you want to see the application? When do you want to start receiving them? So what happened with this committee is we got them all at once and they were overwhelmed. They were like, oh, yeah, they got them that morning. And that's why they thought that's what they wanted until that happened. And then they were overwhelmed. So the question is, what do you guys want? When do you want to start receiving the resumes and applications?
When did the posting close?
It's not closed, it's still open. The 11 that they will be doing video interviews will be the week of June 5th through the 9th.
I thought May 23rd was the final
reading.
deadline.
It's just the first review of the applications.
Oh,
it's still open, and it'll stay open until.
Is there a deadline for applications to come in?
No, not yet. Not until you guys tell. Not until the board.
So May 23rd, I knew was some key date. It's the first date you're looking at application.
That was the first.
Or the first interview date?
May 23rd. I think it was like.
I have a
May 9th, I think it was, wasn't it?
And actually, I think what was posted was May 23rd was the date of first review. So any applications that come in through May 23rd would be looked at least.
Okay, so we will be looking at them, but some people are going to be going on vacation. So they wanted to start getting some video interviews scheduled so that when they come back from vacation, there's 2 of them going to be on vacation at the same time.
So will you, like you're going to do, we'll pretend like there are no other applications that come in, but so you're going to do video interviews of those 11. Are you narrowing it down to like 5 from there? I don't remember what we discussed.
That was going to be another question I had. Do you want 3? Do you want 5? How many do you want as suggestions?
Well, and my question is, if you have, you've narrowed it down to 11 right now that you want to do video interviews with, are we going to be asked for input before the video interviews, or
I was going to ask
I'm not
you-
sure what kind of input are we going to be giving and when, at what stage?
Okay, so I would recommend going ahead and getting what applications and resumes that we have, so you can be looking at them and considering them.
Okay.
So any communication that you receive, you can go back and refer to that resume or that application and know when somebody says something, you know what they're talking about.
I would request you record the video interviews so that if you need to go back and reference something after you've whittled it down or something, you can go back and look at. People constantly are like, well, no, what'd that person say? So if you can record it so you can reference it again later, it would help you.
Yeah.
Based on your recommendation, I would say we should get the applications as soon as you can get them to us. I'm guessing all 11.
I think it'll be easier on you whenever we say, oh, did you see so-and-so's? You can go look at it and see what they're talking about.
I guess for clarification, you're asking for the 11, but at the end of the day, you guys are supposed to get them all. So do you want all of them now, or do you want the 11 now and then the other ones?
I would suggest all.
Okay, that's fine.
Even so, all 28? With a list of the 11.
That's what I was
narrowed
saying.
down.
Separate the 11 into a separate envelope or something. Yeah.
Yes, we can do that very easily. Yes, we can do that.
No.
Is that?
And
then you want it narrowed down to how many for our next meeting?
I think the final recommendation to the board was gonna be 5.
Okay, so everybody's
Like
agreeing
your,
on
like
5.
your, like your top 5.
And then will y'all forward on the applications and resumes as they come in?
Yeah, they should from now on. Once you ask for them, you'll start getting them.
Okay. Thank you.
And I had one more question. I'm trying to think of what it is, but I can't remember. So, and are you guys all okay with me sitting in on the video interviews?
I lost your question.
Are you all okay with me sitting in on the video interviews?
I think we all agreed you're a fully functional member of that committee, so.
That's all I had.
That's all you have?
Mm-hmm.
You're sure?
No, that's.
I'm usually the
Well,
one who jumps
you
in
know, I'm
later.
trying to include everybody on this process because it is a little different process than history, so.
Thank you, Lisa. I want to congratulate our police on the National Police Week. Our chief of police did a great interview on the city Facebook page. And I also wanted to congratulate our Parks and Rec Director, Travis Cheney. He did a really great interview describing the changes to the kayak park. And if you haven't watched that, it's on the city Facebook page, and he did a great job. So I appreciate both those. And of course, those interviews are so well done because of Megan, our new communications officer. So thank you for doing those, guys. I had a question, Christina, if you can go do some research, because we had, golly, a big part of last year and even this year, we had a bad response on the sanitation only having one truck for so many months. And we had people on Facebook saying, I haven't had a reduction in my bill, but I've only gotten pickup 2 times this month. Now that we have the new truck, you know, that came about because the board insisted we just need to go ahead and get a new truck because we couldn't fix the other trucks. It was well, I'll just say it. City dropped the ball. We dropped the ball, and I think the city owes our customers some recompense for not doing its job. And so I would like us to look at possibly providing 1 month of free service of sanitation to all customers for 1 month. And if you could just research what it would cost us and let us know.
Just to clarify, you're talking about pickup, or are you talking about dumpsters, or are you talking about everything?
Talk about everything.
Okay, so would these be for existing, so like for dumpsters, the people come and go, come and go, come and go? Not every one of them, but we do have roll-off dumpsters. So I just want to make sure that this is for the people that have like a normal dumpster where they're at.
Well, maybe you
They're not
can
renting
break it
one,
down,
or-
break it
okay.
down, yeah.
Okay.
Pickup, residential pickup?
Yes.
So I don't see that as a dumpster.
No.
No,
She's
but
talking
there are
about something
places where
different.
people live where there are dumpsters, like at the apartment buildings.
Oh, right.
And that's
Yeah,
great,
yeah.
but then there's people that rent like construction dumpsters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw comments on both on
Okay.
Facebook. I saw comments of people saying their dumpster had not been picked up 2 out of the last 4 weeks. And I saw comments from people saying our trash can didn't get picked up. So I would like, maybe you can break it down and just give us some input as to what it would cost if we considered it. It's just an idea. And then I wanted to say I represented the city this morning at the grand opening of the Whataburger, the new Whataburger, and it was incredible. Probably the best grand opening I've attended in a long time. We were honored to have the American Legion Honor Guard present the colors and raise the flag, and our school choir sang the national anthem. And it was a really great turnout of citizens and Whataburger associates, all thanks to the coordination of the Chamber of Commerce's Lindsay Taylor. what got me really pumped up was seeing the permanent decals on the store window, one of which read, "One Nation, under God, indivisible." And it just really told a story to me of what a great American success story by the founding family of Whataburger that started this in Corpus Christi, and their belief in God and what made them a success. You know, growing up in Siloam as a little kid, we had the A&W Drive-In, the Four Seas restaurant, the Barnett family had the Dairyette, and the Dairy Queen was just down the street, and we had the Southern Grill downtown. That was about it. And when our church choir at First Baptist would travel on the road, if we weren't to Tulsa, we'd always go to Casa Bonita. But if we went south to Little Rock or Russellville or wherever, it was a requirement. We had to have lunch at Whataburger in Russellville. And for the longest time, I thought it was the only one, and I thought it was started by a Russellville family. I had no idea it was such a big chain. So now we finally have our own Whataburger, and it was an exciting day. They even have, as you go in, the wallpaper has our city name and the zip code in big letters made into the wallpaper. It was amazing. It really was. But and the service, I went through the drive-thru before they did the main grand opening, and a smile goes such a long way, folks. And the employees that came out and took your money and then brought you your change and then came back and delivered your food every time, smiling, thanking me for being a customer. It was a nice change, and it was very humbling. But I want to give a big thank you to Alex Allison, the managing partner and store manager here, for the company's generosity and kindness. They have partnered with the Boys and Girls Club of West Benton County for its charity work. And it was a nice event today. And now I'll just address something. A few meetings back, the question came up about the city board's vision and what each of us see as the future of Siloam Springs. And of course, this came about because of the decision to search for a new city administrator. And I've refused to get into the weeds on the reasons for need and change of management, but I can assure the public not a single one of my reasons was founded on petty personal differences. My vision for our city's future is based upon the bedrock of what Siloam Springs has stood on for generations: fairness to all, affordable cost of living, freedom to worship with almost any religion or church represented, equal treatment of all citizens with no playing favorites. And I will stand by my previous platforms in running for office. I support lower utility rates because I believe our city went overboard in raising rates of all utilities every year, and it was pre-decided only on a 5-year basis. It took us from the lowest in the state to become nearly the highest, and I believe we can afford to roll back some rates in the future. Affordable cost of living is a key component of the bedrock of our city. And that component got out of whack when we had a new CEO from a very liberal state that had a very high cost of living, and that state is accustomed to raising taxes, fees, and rates to keep spending on projects. I'm a firm believer that spending should benefit all citizens of a community, not just a select group in a specific area of town. I've also supported term limits for elected officials, and as someone who has voluntarily chosen not to run again after 2 previous stints on the board, I believe it is the right thing to do. I have only ever run for office to help my fellow man, to work for the regular Joe Public, factory worker, general population who often feel that they have no voice with government and believe it's a waste of time to speak up because they're always going to get run over. But being elected to this board is an honor, and it comes with a directive to do what is best for all citizens, not what is best for city employees or to make their job easier, not to agree on everything that is brought up to spend taxpayer money, and if we can't spend it here, then we'll spend it on another item. The fiduciary responsibility that comes along with this position is of very serious nature, and I take it very serious. I am a big supporter of infrastructure, maintaining the streets which allow all traffic and commerce to take place in our city. In 2021, our city administrator stated in a board meeting that, quote, "we got a little behind on spending for streets," which was an understatement because streets were given short shrift and not provided the importance factor of spending relative to other important necessities provided by the city. The amount of drainage problems that have been rising for several years have also been given less importance on the goal list because the city took its eyes off of a key reason we have a city: to provide the necessities of life that a citizen cannot provide alone by themselves at a cost-efficient manner, namely electricity, water and sewer, street maintenance, and police and fire protection. There wouldn't be a United States of America without states to be part of that union. And there would be no Arkansas or any other state without cities making up those area governments. And cities would not exist without people, and people would not be here if not for God and his directive to go forth and multiply. So cities are here for one reason, and that is to provide for its people. We're sitting here to represent all persons, not a small select few, not special interest groups, not corporations or small businesses, and certainly not the ideologies of staff or citizens or board members, but all persons who've chosen Siloam Springs as their home. This board of directors has no requirement to abide by past board's decisions. Every day is a new day, and every other year is a new board of directors, whether it's only one new one or two or four. I want to see a return to the values that built Siloam Springs to become the home for nearly 18,000 individuals. What generations have worked for and strived for and have truly been offended by the sudden left turn of an ideology that a majority don't believe in or support, and certainly didn't have a say or a vote to force this change in city culture. The majority of citizens in our city are not a party to or supportive of the vastly different mindset of wokeness or belief in a system supporting an unlimited number of genders or gender fluidity that flies in the face of everything that science has proven for millennia, not to mention the most published and most read book in history, the Bible. I don't speak for this board, and I don't speak for a majority of Siloam Springs citizens, but I speak for enough citizens to know what I have understood, that a majority will not tolerate or abide by the ruination or corruption of the next generation of children growing up in Siloam Springs. So my vision is also about values and the bedrock of values that built our fair city to become the independent, safe home on the west side of Benton County. I want to see our city get back to celebrating life and everything that our city offers, not to divide by culture or politics or the elite versus the working person. I absolutely hate to see anyone taking lessons from the folks in Washington, D.C. to portray a culture of division, of divide and conquer, as a face of unity when it is clearly not. As I said a while back, our city has far too many positive things to ever be negative about Siloam. Let the greatness of Siloam Springs continue to shine through. We don't need a slogan of "Make Siloam Great Again," but instead, "Make Siloam Even Greater." Thank you. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Or I will make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. We are adjourned.